Hey there, welcome to Mary Grace Media. Whether you're here for the first time or the 100th time, I'm really glad you found me and I hope you enjoy the content. I'm just going to encourage you to jump right in, and if you do like it, make sure you subscribe, follow, share, leave comments, and go check out my website, marygracemedia.com. And I just pray that God blesses you and your family and that you walk in His peace all the days of your life. Hello everybody, welcome to Mary Grace Media, Real Talk with Mary Grace. It is Thursday afternoon and we are live, and I want to welcome everybody. Hope you're having a good day, and if you would, please share this. Please hit the arrow in the bottom of your screen, share this, invite followers, invite from the beginning if you can, and then also retweet this if you can. So that would be great. And we're going to get going in just a minute. But first, how is everybody? Let me know you're here by hitting the screen and touch the screen so you can give me hearts, and then also just drop a hello in the comments if you can. Please go ahead and share this, invite followers, and let everybody know that you're here, that I'm here today live. We're going to bring some good content today. I do appreciate everybody being here. How is it going? How are you guys liking the Tuesday, Thursday broadcasts? Go ahead and give me some feedback. I have my email open, but I don't get many emails yet. Sometimes I do. How's the feed also? It looks like people are maybe getting dropped off the feed. How is it going? You're loving it? Okay, good. Just the numbers are super low right now, so I might have to go out and come back in. But we'll see. I have a lot of important things to talk about, so I'm hoping we can get this out, share this out with as many people as you can. And if my prayer warriors would just be praying against any interference here, that would be awesome, because the message I have is important, and I want to get that out. Yeah. So welcome everybody. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's great. And I have a couple of moderators too, so that's good. Yeah. I'm going to chat a little bit and see how this goes, because I think people aren't getting my notifications. I noticed the other day that the numbers were really low, and I think it was because of my title. So today I put up a really benign title, but I'm not sure it's helping, so we'll see. Hey Andrea, good to see you. Invite followers. We're just chatting for a little bit to get started, But I can tell you guys while we're waiting, if you wanted to reach out to me through my website, that's marygracemedia.com. Andrea, can you message Medic, because he doesn't always get my messages, and so he doesn't get my notifications either. So I know if he's in the zone, he doesn't pay attention. But that would be great. So yeah, I watched Your Scope today. It was good. Hey there, how's it going? How's everybody doing? It's a beautiful day here in Virginia. It's kind of chilly, but I feel like we didn't really even have winter. Spring is on the way, and flowers are starting to bud, and it's February. So I'm okay with that, but it wouldn't have been bad to have a little bit of cold weather so that we don't get, there's Praying Medic. So it would have been good to have a little bit of cold weather so it would kill mosquitoes and things like that. So anyway, so here we are. The gang's all here. I got a lot to talk about, and I wanted to talk about some things a lot. I have a whole list. But thank you everybody for sharing. I do appreciate it. And also, thank you for being here. Thank you for the support, and for all of your enthusiasm about the content. So I wanted to start by telling you a little story from the Bible. And this is about Gideon. I'm not going to give you the whole story, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit to lead us into what I'm going to talk about on the political spectrum. And if you're new and this is your first time watching me, what I do is I like to kind of give the 30,000 foot view of what's going on politically, culturally, and in the religious sphere sometimes. And I like to do that from a biblical perspective and help people to look at what's going on and be able to stay grounded in the truth, which is Jesus, which is the Word of God. So if that's something that you're interested in, then stick around. And if you do have comments for me, drop them in the comments. Hit the screen and touch the heart so I know you're here. But while I'm doing my show, I don't usually respond to comments, so don't get offended if I don't. So here we go. So Gideon, if you guys know, this story is from the book of Judges in the Old Testament, and this is the Judges chapter 6. So Gideon was a Jewish man, and his entire family, his tribe, had been all the Jews had been oppressed, and Gideon was actually in hiding when the angel of the Lord came to him. He was threshing wheat in a wine press. So he was really demoralized. And his story, I believe, parallels with a lot of the patriots who are a part of this movement that we are engaged in right now, which is taking back our country and taking back and rebuilding the rule of law and rebuilding the Constitution of the United States of America and protecting all of the institutions that we hold so dear. But I would say that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, even 4 years ago, 3 years ago for some people, I would say that we had a lot of Gideons who were really demoralized about what was happening. But the word of the Lord came to him and said, "Hey, mighty warrior, I've got plans for you." And Gideon paid attention, and he was afraid at first, but then the Lord said, "Don't be afraid, I'm with you." And so this is what, so the first thing that God told Gideon to do, this is in chapter 6, verse 25. It says, the same night, it came about that the Lord said to him, "Take your father's bull and a second bull 7 years old and pull down the altar of Baal, which belongs to your father, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it, and build an altar to the Lord your God on the top of the stronghold in an orderly manner, and take the second bull and offer a burnt offering with the word of the Asherah which you shall cut down." Then Gideon took 10 men and his servants and did as the Lord had spoken to him. And it came about, because he was too afraid of his father's household and the men of the city to do it by day, he did it by night. So he obeyed. He just did it in the dark. And so this is significant. If you know anything about the symbolism of what that is, these are pagan gods. So Baal and Asherah, they're like the top gods, and the Asherah represents the female goddess, and it's significant because these monuments, these gods, were ruling over the city, and the Hebrews were oppressed by that. And so the first thing that Gideon was instructed to do, he wasn't instructed initially to go out to battle. The first thing he was instructed to do was to tear down the high places of the foreign gods. And I touched on that the other day, but this is something that in America, as believers, we have been remiss, and we have allowed the high places of the foreign gods to take place in all of our institutions, in our government, in our education system, in our entertainment, in our families, everywhere, in our churches, unfortunately. And so that's something that we've allowed. And I would say that that one of the things that started to happen with the presidency of Donald Trump, he talked about draining the swamp, and we didn't know the extent to which he was referring to that, but a lot of that had to do with mobilizing believers, mobilizing Christians to take back the things that we had allowed to be replaced by the high places of the enemy. And we see that a lot with Q. So people who are following Q, one of the things that Q constantly exhorts the Q followers to do is to pray, but also to put on the armor of God and to fight this fight from a perspective of being clothed in the armor of God, which is really significant, because if you're fighting from that perspective, you are not, you are tearing down the high places. And those are the things that would rise up against the knowledge of God. And so we're starting with this because it's really important. And then if you know the story of Gideon, he went on with his men to win the battle, and a lot of people fell away. Actually, God instructed him to take only 300 people into battle. But that's another part of the story. And so I want to I want to move on because I want to talk about what's going on now in our modern times and in this administration. And so I want to start with Jeff Sessions. And Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General in 2017 and 2018. And he was appointed by Donald Trump. And there's been a lot of controversy around him because people think that he didn't do anything. There was an entire group of what we call shills who pretend to be MAGA, pretend to be on the conservative side, and they're actually there to sow dissension and doubt in the minds of the people who are supporting the president. And so that was something that was happening around the service of Jeff Sessions. And one of the biggest reasons for that is because Jeff Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. I'm not going to go into the details of why he did that right now. What I am going to talk about is some of the things that Jeff Sessions did as Attorney General. And one of the things that he's most known for is putting into motion the investigations and the prosecution and the indictments with human trafficking, and especially in child porn and all of those things that nobody really believed was happening. And so Jeff Sessions is responsible for getting a lot of that in place. And in fact, a lot of people, if they don't outright hate Jeff Sessions and they want to give him some kind of concession for actually getting something accomplished, they say, well, at least he did, at least he was effective with human trafficking. And I want to raise a point about this because they say that like it's a throwaway thing that he did, that it was just he didn't really go after deep state. He really didn't accomplish what we wanted him to, but at least he helped the children. I'm going to challenge you to turn that around if you think like that, because that is not an at least. That is a very significant thing that he did. And I'm going to tell you why, because it plays into everything that we're seeing now. Jeff Sessions teed up the ball for the things that we see happening right now. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. So go back to the story that I told you about Gideon tearing down the statue of Baal and the Asherah and tearing down the high places. Well, one of the things that we have witnessed as we become more aware of what's happened with human trafficking and with child porn and victimization is that our children have been sacrificed on the altars of the high places of evil. And this is something that has been brought to light in the past couple of years in a way that most people were never ever aware of. And so it is a big deal. It's a very big deal from a spiritual perspective that we have righteous and godly men and women who are standing up for rule of law and putting into place the mechanisms not only to catch and prosecute the people who are engaged in this heinous practice, but we are also seeing we're also seeing these children and women and even men in some cases, we're seeing them being helped to recover. So that's a big deal. It's a big deal, but it's also a big deal for another reason, and I'm going to tell you why that is. So now a lot of people, there's a tendency and a temptation to look at that as a standalone problem. Okay, well now I'm glad we got that fixed. It's not completely fixed, trust me. It's happening right here within the borders of our country. The people who are opposing it, the people who want to abolish ICE, the people who are in favor of sanctuary cities, they're aiding and abetting this practice. And the people who are opposing the wall, they're aiding and abetting this practice. And so we know that on the face of it, this is evil, that what's happening is evil, but there's more to it than that. Because as we've gotten more information about the way that the deep state works, the way that the cabal works, and if you're not familiar with that term, that's basically what we would call a shadow government of individuals who work from nefarious for nefarious purposes and motivations to undermine the government of the United States and to enact what we call a new world order, where our country has where the sovereignty of our country is eroded, and this shadow government known as the deep state takes over. And that had been happening for a long time, and they were able to work in secret. And there are many people who've talked about this. Praying Medic is one of them. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but what I am going to say is that I would venture to say that Jeff Sessions, in conjunction with the president and the Q team, was one of the first people to really tee up the ball to cut off the head of the snake known as the deep state, and to dig down and to go down into his den and find the source and cut off the source of what makes the deep state function. So let's go back to the trafficking. Now, if you are engaged in nefarious activities, then you need money to do that. So whether it's trafficking individuals, whether it's drugs, whether it's any of that, those are sources of money. And so what kind of nefarious activities am I talking about? I'm talking about any terrorist activity that would undermine the sovereignty of our nation. And that happens within our borders and outside of our borders. So we're talking about corruption, we're talking about bribery, we're talking about military action, we're talking about spying, we're talking about stealing intellectual property, we're talking about training insurgents to go against our allies. There's all kinds of things that can count as terrorist activity and as corruption. But for any of that to function, there has to be money. And so what we're looking at when we have human trafficking, when we have open borders, when we have a drug trade, all of that supplies the money that feeds the beast known as deep state and terrorist activity. You following me? So it's a pretty simple, you can just follow the money trail. So one of the things that was started by Jeff Sessions right from the get-go was we're gonna go after these people, we're gonna identify them, and we're gonna cut off the resources that feed this subversive behavior. And how else did that happen? A lot of you know that something else happened in 2017 that was addressed and aimed specifically at the people who were funding nefarious activity. So I'm going to come to that. But right now I want to talk about something that happened in December of 2017, and that is that the president issued an executive order. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most important things he could have done. And that was the executive order on December 21st, 2017. You can go to the whitehouse.gov, and then under presidential actions, you can just look up executive orders. You can also go on the Federal Register and you can look up Executive Orders 2017, and you can find the text of it there. It's important that you read it. But one of the important things about this, and I'm going to read a little bit of it. It says, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the National Emergencies Act, and the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, the Immigration and Nationality Act. So he bases this executive order off of some important acts, one of which is the National Emergencies Act. And he says, he talks about the prevalence of and severity of human rights abuse and corruption that have their source in whole or in substantial part outside the United States, such as those committed, they've reached such a scope and gravity that they threaten the stability of international political and economic systems. And then he says human rights abuse and corruption undermine the values that form an essential foundation of stable, secure, and functioning society. So he lays the groundwork for this, and he talks about human rights abuses and corruption. That's an important thing. Who has been at the forefront lately talking about corruption? If you've been paying attention, you've seen this. Who has been all over the news uncovering and talking about corruption that's been happening through our government and through very highly placed elected officials in our country? Who's been talking about that? Rudy Giuliani. He's been in Ukraine, and he's talking about other places too. So keep that in mind, because Rudy Giuliani has been on this case. So let's get back to this. But the ball started rolling on all of this before 2017, but this executive order was issued in 2017. And so this is considered because it's a threat to national security, the president also declared a national emergency to deal with it. And so that's important that you understand that piece of it. It's not just an executive order blocking the assets and seizing the assets of these individuals. It also carries with it a national emergency. And that comes into play later on when we talk about the abilities that the president has to make decisions regarding the military, and especially military tribunals. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. So are you guys following me? I'm trying to keep this at the surface level without digging too deep, but I encourage you to go deep into these things and go prayerfully if you can, because these are really important issues that people need to understand, because the fake news knows, some of them know, some of them have like the IQ of a potato, but the politicians like Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein and Feinstein Chi-Fi and all these people know this. They know what I'm talking about, and so do the attorneys that bring these frivolous lawsuits against the Trump administration. Most of those lawsuits, by the way, are not intended to win. They are intended as a distraction to tie up the president's legal teams, the Department of Justice. They're intended to, they're like speed bumps that will divert resources and tie up the resources that are needed to prosecute and defend actual crimes. Just so you know that. But because the people that are in the most deep muckety-muck, they know exactly what I'm talking about here. I can guarantee you that when this executive order was issued, there were a lot of people who had heart palpitations or worse when they saw this. This was like an oh crap moment for a lot of people, because remember, they were trying to, they said within minutes of the president's swearing in, now it's time to start his impeachment. They were ready to impeach him before he even got sworn in. So keep that in mind. The people that are being addressed in this executive order are people who knew from the get-go that this president was onto them and that he was going to be able to bring down the hammer on them. So keep that in mind. So now, so this is what he says in the executive order. Again, I encourage you to go read it. I'm not going to go through everything, but he says, so this is what it is. All property and interest in property, all property and interests in property that are in the United States, that hereafter come within the United States, or that are hereafter come within the possessions or control of any United States person of the following persons are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. And so he lists a whole list, one of which is people that are involved in human rights abuses. The other is people that are involved in corruption. So there's a lot here. And then that even if they are, it says the transfer or the facilitation of the transfer of the proceeds of corruption. So that means ill-gotten gains. Any money, any possessions, any military equipment, any assets that were gained through corruption, this executive order grants the power to seize that. And so that's important. And then also, if they've been a leader or official of any government entity that is engaged in the activities, and so he's holding the leaders of these groups responsible as well, okay? If they've attempted to engage in these activities. So it goes more and more, okay? And then he says, any person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, okay, to have material assisted, sponsored, provided financial, material, technological support for or goods or services in support of any activity described above, any person whose property and interest in property are blocked pursuant. So basically he's saying not only are the people involved in this corruption and human rights abuses held accountable, but anybody that's aiding them and helping them. And it goes on to say that you can't even, nobody can raise money for these people. You can't start a GoFundMe for these people. It doesn't use that wording, but that's basically what it says. And so this is really important. And then the important thing to remember too is that in the process of doing this, he declares a national emergency. And so why does that matter? So this laid the groundwork. Jeff Sessions laid the groundwork for what we were looking at and for the kinds of investigations that we knew were coming, but it also laid the groundwork for literally seizing the property and stopping the funding of the things that these people have been doing. And so are you tracking with me? It's a lot. It's a lot to think about. It's hard to get your head around it. But I want to jump forward now to the next thing. Any questions so far? Any questions? I'm going to take that as a no. If you're good, touch the screen, hit the hearts. Let's keep going. Okay. So now, if you think about what's been happening lately, there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of talk about cleaning house, right? There's been a lot of talk about corruption. We've seen that if you've been paying attention, you've seen that there have been literally thousands of people arrested, not just in the US, but in other countries for child trafficking, for internet porn, for child porn, for all of these things. So these people, remember, when you want to get to the head of the snake, you have to go low and start high. And so when we see arrests of smaller players in a trafficking ring, what do you think they're doing, and what do you think is going to be happening to those people? They're going to be giving up information. And so what you want is to try to get to the heads of these organizations. And we're looking at organizations that are based all over the world. There's the Chinese, the Mexicans, the Middle East, all over the Middle East, African. There's different groups that run their illegal activities through our borders. It's not just Mexicans. And so when you bust a trafficking ring or you bust a porn ring, what you're really wanting to do is get to the top, a drug ring or whatever. Okay. So now I want to talk to you about something that, let me just think where I want to go here for a second. Give me just a second. Somebody play some hold music. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit about resignations. So one of the things that Q said early on was watch for resignations, watch CEO resignations. And just this week, the CEO of Disney resigned, the CEO of Salesforce resigned. There's a whole bunch more that I haven't even listed because the list of resignations is really long. And Praying Medic tweeted out yesterday, there's a link to, does anybody have the link? There's a, here we go. I know what it is. Somebody put this in. It's just resignation.info. And this guy does shows on this, and he has compiled the most amazing list and cross-referencing of resignations worldwide. And it's amazing. So go ahead and take a look at that when I'm done here, because you're going to see it's a lot of people. Now, some people retired. Some people were forced into early retirement. Some people are resigned, were forced to resign. And so again, think about this. Think about it. If you start by going after the little guys, right? You're going after human trafficking. You're catching the mules. You're catching the people that are transporting these people across the country, the drivers, the people who are housing them. These are the small players in the bigger game. And so you move up the chain as you get these people and you get them under interrogation. And eventually it all leads back to the leaders of the organizations. And in many, many cases, there are CEOs of big companies who are involved in these kinds of things. We have suspected and had evidence for a long time of Disney's involvement with child trafficking and victimization. Everything that happened with Jeffrey Epstein. 3 years ago, people were saying that all of us were crazy. What do you mean there's child trafficking? Yeah, right, conspiracy theorist. Well, actually, no, we're not. And so the truth is coming out, and people who are praying for this, the truth is being exposed. And so they're rolling up these smaller players, and as time goes on, year after year, we're seeing more resignations. And so I don't know if Epstein's assets were seized. I would imagine maybe somebody can weigh in on that. But the point is that, we're going to see more and more of these resignations. We see people who, step down or even die for mysterious reasons. They died in their 50s or 60s or whatever. I'm not saying that the white hats, that the good guys are killing them off. I'm just saying that there's a lot of people in very high places who have very cushy careers who are just suddenly resigning. So it's very interesting. And so what happens with these people? And that's what brings me to my next point, and that is this. So how do we deal with people who are actively involved in aiding and abetting and supporting corruption and funding corruption and benefiting financially from corruption? Because we've seen that anybody who's paying attention sees that that's been taking place. And another way that the money has been flowing is through your own tax dollars. Your tax dollars are going out. Your tax dollars are going out through international aid packages under U.S. aid, and they're coming back into the pockets of politicians through lucrative positions that are granted to family members, such as Hunter Biden getting a lucrative board position on the company called Burisma. He was making like $85,000 a month, and he knew nothing about oil and gas. He didn't speak Ukrainian. He was kicked out of the military because he was a cokehead. And you see things like this. You see these cushy jobs that are given to family members. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Pelosi's son. So John Kerry's, was it his son-in-law? So these people get these cushy positions. There are people who get ambassadorships. There are people who get positions in the State Department all over the world. And so it's important to understand the funding that comes, that goes out is being laundered So we've got money coming in through corruption, such as drug trafficking and human trafficking. We also have money that's being recycled and laundered from your tax dollars, and so that's critical, because that money has also passed through the hands of foreign individuals and back into the hands of U.S. citizens. And so it's very safe to say that many of these politicians have not only benefited, but aided and abetted this type of terrorist activity. And so we look at these huge organizations that have gotten money, and we're starting to see some bigger convictions and arrests. For example, the mayor of Baltimore was convicted to, I think it was 3 years in prison for tax fraud, because she was using aid money that was given to the city of Baltimore to pay for her book production of books that never actually got distributed. And so that was, completely fraudulent. And so I think that so we're starting to see that, and remember that the president didn't even start talking about corruption in Baltimore until 2019. But my thinking about that, and I talked about this the other day, is that in many cases, our government, our top officials, they have to let the crimes play out so that they can build a chain of evidence, so that they can prosecute these cases. So they probably suspected that things were amiss with Baltimore way before 2019, but because Trump had just gotten into office, they had to actually just disperse the money and then have the right people in place to watch and see where the money went. And then they could go in and make the arrest. And so we're going to see more of that. I'm pretty sure we are. But let's go back to the people and the institutions, or people in the organizations that are involved in outright treason, that are aiding and abetting the people that would destroy our nation. So whether it's terrorist activity, whether it's drug traffickers, whether it's human trafficking, any of that. So how does that work? So I want to play you a video that was from 2018. Okay, and if you guys watched, did you guys watch the Kavanaugh hearings? Give me a thumbs up or touch the hearts if you watched the Kavanaugh hearings, if you were paying attention during that. That was October of 2018. So when they tried to destroy Justice Kavanaugh. Yeah, okay. So did it make you mad? It made me mad. It turned a lot of Democrats into Republicans, I can tell you that. A lot of people walked away when they saw that. Yeah. So there was something that there was a line of questioning that Lindsey Graham asked Judge Kavanaugh at the time. And I'm going to play it, and I want you to listen to it. I don't have the fancy setup that Greg has and all these people, but I'm just going to play it on my iPad and let you listen, okay? Because I want you to hear what he's asking him. Okay, it's about 2 minutes long.
TV down more on Connecticut Avenue. There were TVs out. Mayflower Hotel. I remember I was with.
He's telling Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions is asking him about 9/11. Where were you? Okay, so this is where we are in the conversation.
Sarah Taylor, who worked at the White House.
Can you hear it? Okay.
We were watching as the standing with her when the buildings fell.
So when somebody says post 9/11 that we've been at war, and it's called the war on terrorism, do you generally agree with that concept?
I do, Senator, because Congress passed the authorization for use of military force, which is still in effect, and that was passed.
Remember that. Congress passed the authorization for use of military force. It's still in effect. Don't forget that.
Of course, on September 14th, 2001, 3 days later.
Let's talk about the law in war. Is there a body of law called the law of armed conflict?
There is such a body, Senator.
Is there a body of law that's called basic criminal law?
Yes, Senator.
Are there differences between those two bodies of law?
Yes, Senator.
From an American citizen's point of view, do your constitutional rights follow you? If you're in Paris, does the Fourth Amendment protect you as an American from your own government?
From your own government, yes.
Okay. So, if you're in Afghanistan, do your constitutional rights protect you against your own government?
If you're an American in Afghanistan, you have constitutional rights as against the U.S. government.
Is there a long-standing...
That's
Right.
long settled law.
Isn't there also a long-settled law that it goes back to the Eisenstrater case? I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, Johnson versus Eisentrager.
Right. That America...
Do you see what Lindsey Graham did there? I just want to stop this for a second. First of all, a good lawyer never asks questions that he doesn't already know the answer to. Now, Lindsey Graham knows the case that he's asking about, but he says it, and he says it incorrectly because he wants to get it on record that Judge Kavanaugh knows exactly what case he's talking about, and he knows that Judge Kavanaugh is going to name the case, and he's going to name it correctly. So now it's on the record.
American citizens who collaborate with the enemy have considered enemy combatants.
They can be.
Can be.
They can be. They're often some.
Hold on. I'm going to go back. I want you to hear this.
Rights protect you against your own government.
Okay.
If you're an American in Afghanistan, you have constitutional rights as against the U.S. government.
Is there a long-standing...
That's
Right.
long settled law.
Isn't there also a long-settled law that it goes back to the Eisenstrater case? I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah,
Eisentrager.
Johnson versus Eisentrager.
Right. That American citizens who collaborate with the enemy have considered enemy combatants.
They can be.
Can be.
They can be. They're often they're sometimes criminally prosecuted, sometimes treated in the military
Well, let's talk about can be. I think
under Supreme Court precedent.
Right.
Just wanna make it-
There's a Supreme Court decision that said that American citizens who collaborated with Nazi saboteurs were tried by the military. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think a couple of them were executed.
Yeah.
So if anybody doubts, there's a long-standing history in this country that your constitutional rights follow you wherever you go, but you don't have a constitutional right to turn on your own government and collaborate with the enemy of the nation. You'll be treated...
You don't have a constitutional right to turn on your own government and collaborate with an enemy of the nation. Write that down. Okay, so next time the fake news media starts tweeting about how Orange Man bad, remember this. Okay?
treated differently. What's the name of the case
Hold on.
if you can...
That's correct.
I think a couple of them were executed.
Yeah.
I'll play that again.
So if anybody doubts, there's a long-standing history in this country that your constitutional rights follow you wherever you go, but you don't have a constitutional right to turn on your own government and collaborate with the enemy of the nation. You'll be treated differently. What's the name of the case, if you can recall, that reaffirmed the concept that you could hold one of our own as an enemy combatant if they were engaged in terrorist activities in Afghanistan? Are you familiar with that case?
Yeah. Hamdi.
Okay. So the bottom line is, I want every American citizen to know you have constitutional rights, but you do not have a constitutional right to collaborate with the enemy. There's a body of law well developed long before 9/11 that understood the difference between basic criminal law and the law of armed conflict. Do you understand those differences?
I do understand that there are different bodies of law, of course, Senator.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So, what do you guys think about that? Remember that? Do you remember? Okay. So, we're having all kinds of revelations that are coming out about crimes that are being committed. We are, the president himself has tweeted treason, right? He's tweeted about this. That's what this is. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about United States citizens who are collaborating with the enemy to harm our nation. So this is something that a lot of people don't understand. And so because this is going on, and because we are in a state of emergency, okay, the law of armed conflict applies. We are still at war. We are in the war on terror. People don't realize that, but we are. And so the president has powers that actually circumvent Congress when we're already in a time of war. I am not a military legal expert. I am not a lawyer, but I do know that that's the case. And so you can look up the law of armed conflict. You can look up what happens when we're under a national emergency. And so we are still, every president since Bush has extended the emergency, which applies to the war on terror. That's why when the president wrote this executive order, he applied it to the war on terror. Now, we have been engaged in the war on terror on our own soil and also in our borders in areas of Mexico as well, not just overseas. We're not just sending our military overseas to engage in the war on terror. So that's important to understand. They're coming right into our own shores. And so what happens is that because of the way the law is right now, and because we are under the law of armed conflict, we have the president is authorized to use military force. He's authorized to use Gitmo to detain U.S. citizens, and there's the authorization to use military tribunals, and so. Why would you use military tribunals? Why would you do that? I want to direct you to an article that was written by Kayleigh McEnany. She's on the Trump campaign, but she actually used to write. She used to write for CNN, of all things, and she worked at CNN. A lot of you may remember her. She's blonde, and she does a lot of the man on the street interviews during the Trump rallies. That's Kayleigh, and her husband plays for the Baltimore Orioles. She just had a baby. So Kayleigh does these interviews, and she wrote an article. In 2016. I think it was 2016, about whether Trump was justified in saying that he could use military tribunals to try American enemy combatants. And so she did a really good job on this, and it's from CNN.com. It's on their website, and the title is Donald Trump Right About Military Tribunals? And so you can go and read that. But the important point that she makes is, yes, he is. And at the time when he said that, of course, the fake news tried to say that he was going to circumvent Congress, that he was going to break all kinds of laws, that he was going to be a dictator. But we've heard the same, wah, 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 since he came down the escalator. So, but the point that she was making is, he didn't say that. He didn't say he was just going to randomly use military tribunals, but he did say that there are cases where, if that's warranted, that he would. Now, we know that there's even more knowledge and revelation that's come to light even since that time. And so why use military tribunals? The article talks about it. I'm going to touch on it, but there are a couple of compelling reasons to use military tribunals. Now, one of the reasons that you would do it, obviously, is because our courts have been extremely biased. And if we go back to what I was saying about Jeff Sessions laying the groundwork for getting the ball rolling with the arrest and conviction and investigation of trafficking, the other thing that was happening, of course, is that the president was rebuilding our courts to place constitutional judges on these federal judge seats. And so that is important to know too, because one of the things that we want to avoid at all costs is having individuals get brought up on charges and then go to an activist judge that is going to dismiss a case or that will rule from a point of extreme bias. We've just seen that in Roger Stone's case. We're seeing it in General Flynn's case. So we don't want that. And so we've had to have this time of building and rebuilding. And so do you see that? Do you see how we've had to have some tearing down, just like when I started with the story of Gideon? You have to tear down the high places. And so that means that you take these activist, far-left communist judges out of their seats. In some cases they retire, in some cases the seats were never filled. You flip courts like the Ninth Circuit and you get constitutional judges in place. You don't play your cards. You don't play your cards. What is it that Kenny Rogers says? You don't count your money when you're sitting at the table, right? You don't play your cards when all you have is a handful of ones, right? You got to get your aces in play. And so that's what the president has been doing, and he's been doing it with the help of really true patriots like Jeff Sessions, like Devin Nunes, like Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has been a judge machine, 218 judges last count. And so that's important to understand. So back to the military tribunals. So why would if Lindsey Graham, let me talk about him for a second. People are mad at Lindsey Graham. He's all talk, no action, all hat, no cattle, right? If he goes on another talk show, then I'm gonna lose it, right? Come on, Lindsey, put your money where your mouth is. But here's the thing. Lindsey Graham, in my opinion, if Lindsey Graham is sitting at the Kavanaugh hearing and he's questioning Judge Kavanaugh about military tribunals, remember that Lindsey Graham was a JAG lawyer. He was a military lawyer. He knows what he's talking about. And so if he's questioning Judge Kavanaugh about the use of military tribunals for American citizens who would be considered enemy combatants, wouldn't you think that maybe he's playing the long game? Are there things that Lindsey Graham knows that perhaps the average citizen doesn't know? Are there conversations that Lindsey Graham has had with President Trump and with the Senate Armed Forces Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee, intelligence, are there things that he would know that we wouldn't be privy to? Are there perhaps reasons that he isn't calling witnesses just yet? Are there reasons that he isn't launching investigations? So the same thing with Jeff Sessions. You know, Jeff Sessions is very knowledgeable, and he spent hours and hours and hours with the president on the campaign trail on Air Force One. We know that they talked about more than grandchildren. We know that. And one thing that people don't remember is that Jeff Sessions was the head of the National Security Advisory Council on the Trump campaign. And so Jeff Sessions was Attorney General for Alabama long before he became Attorney General of the United States of America. So this man is very experienced. He was an Eagle Scout. He's like he's the fifth most conservative senator by rank. And so, you know, there's the people who are saying that he didn't do anything. I've already talked about that. That's just crazy. It's not true. But let me go back. I keep getting off the topic. Military tribunals. So why do you do them? You do them because you want to avoid biased judges, but you also do them because they're, and this is brought up, Kayleigh McEnany brought this up in her article in CNN. So one of the reasons that military tribunals are better than civil courts or than criminal courts is you can come back. I'll leave the replay up. Is that you can use, so in a criminal court in the United States, there's a lot of evidence that's excluded, including evidence that's gained under what's called enhanced interrogation. So a lot of that's not always allowed. Well, in a military, you know what enhanced interrogation is, right? So like waterboarding and things like that. So in a military tribunal, that kind of evidence doesn't get thrown out. So that's important to understand. And then the other thing too is that a military tribunal allows for the entrance into evidence of incriminating evidence and classified material because it's military. And you don't have the Jim Acostas and the Maggie Habermans of the world in there yammering and slapping their gums and leaking out classified information to anybody, to the highest bidder. You don't have that in a military tribunal. And so that's another reason that military tribunals are so effective. And so you don't have the leaks. But the other thing you don't have, in some cases, there's no appeal. And so the military tribunal is not run just like a criminal court of law. And you don't get these activist judges. You don't get activist district attorneys or attorneys general who decide not to prosecute somebody because of their politics. So it removes a lot of the politics from the judicial process. And that's important. And so go back again to what Jeff said, to what Lindsey Graham was saying, and he was asking, and he told the American people, don't think that you have a protection, that your constitutional rights are protected under the Constitution when you collaborate with the enemy to undermine the United States of America. He wasn't just saying that to Joe and Jane Citizen. He was saying that to the senators who were sitting there in the room with him. He was saying that to every high-ranking official around the country, every CEO, every person in the military, every religious leader who has been aiding and abetting the enemy and undermining our country. And so it's important to understand that. And I think that as we go into this next phase of what we call the Great Awakening, of the storm, as we move into that, people are going to have to understand you may not see all the trials. You may not even know that there was a trial, because when there's a military tribunal, you're not going to see the media parading down there. They do allow some media to some trials in Guantanamo Bay. So these are held mostly at Guantanamo Bay, from what I understand, and that's where we hold enemy combatants. So typically, you can't hold American citizens at Guantanamo Bay because it's there. It's a military installation, and it's a military prison that's made for enemy combatants. And so that's just important to understand. So we're going to, all the people who are clamoring and yelling, come on, Lindsey, do something. All the people who are saying that Jeff Sessions was asleep, all the people who are saying that Trump has been bamboozled and that he doesn't know who he's working with and that he's losing this. I think that you really need to put these pieces together and pay attention to what's been accomplished so far, and to see that there's a purpose and a plan and a structure and an intention about everything that's been done. Just like I started, when you start a job, a big job like this, in many cases you have to rip down the very things that have been erected to destroy you. And in the case of Gideon, he ripped down the statues of Baal. He ripped down the Asherah, because that's where people had their allegiance. And those were the high places. Those were the things that exalted themselves above God. So the things in our nation that were exalted, the high places in our nation, those are the things that have been started to be torn out and ripped out by honorable men like Jeff Sessions, by the honorable people who are now being put in place in the Department of Justice, in the National Security Council. So think about this. President Trump just appointed Richard Grenell, the acting NSC chairman, and Kash Patel is helping him. So why now? Why didn't that happen a year ago? Why didn't that happen 2 years ago? Why didn't that happen at that time? Well, Richard Grenell has been the ambassador to Germany, and he has been working to investigate and help investigators uncover corruption. Guess where? Ukraine, Eastern Europe, all of Europe. So these things, again, there's a plan and a purpose, and there's a measured way in which these things are happening. It's a military operation. Kash Patel was one of the people who was most instrumental in Devin Nunes delivering the information that he had and uncovering the FISA abuse and really getting to the heart of what was going on there. So there are so many pieces that we don't see behind the scenes. But when we look at these bigger pieces and we can see, hopefully I've helped you see where some of these pieces fall on the board. And so hopefully you can see that. I hope that I've been able to shed some light on that and to give you, like I said, the 30,000 foot view and maybe just hone in, and take some closer views on some of the pieces that have been put in place since the beginning and even before the beginning of Trump's presidency. So I hope that helps. And I'm going to open it up to any comments or questions now. I've got about a few more minutes before I have to go. But how was that? It was a lot of information, and I was trying to talk fast like Andrea, get the information out. But I hope that I've shed some light on some things. Any comments? Hit the hearts. Good. Glad. If you haven't already, please hit the hearts or hit the arrow on the bottom of your screen and go up and click share from beginning, and that way it'll share on Twitter. You can also click the 3 dots on the bottom of your screen and you can copy the link and you can share that link in a text, an email. You can go put it on Facebook or Instagram or wherever you want to. So that's a good way to share this. And because we want people to hear this. There are a lot of people who are still watching the news. Fox News isn't going to go deeply into this, even though people think that they're conservative and they're not always. But that they spend very little time on any given story. And so if you have friends or family members or coworkers who are, for example, conservative, but they think they're getting disheartened and they think that nothing's happening, that's not the case. It's not the case. And so just be aware that the president has it under control. And that reminds me, so I know that there's been a lot of talk about the coronavirus. Obviously, the president gave a press conference last night. But I noticed something very interesting about that, and I wanted to communicate what I've noticed. And actually, my friend Michelle noticed something very interesting too, which is that all the places that the deep state has been, like John Kerry and Joe Biden and Eric Holder, Jim Comey, people like that, these people have been going around the world. Nancy Pelosi, they've been going around trying to undermine the president. And so 3 places that we know of that they've been recently, and where also Durham and Barr have been, is China, Italy, and Iran. And it's very interesting, isn't it? Because those are like the top 3, the first 3 places that we heard about the coronavirus getting worse. And but there's something else I noticed the other day, and I wanted to throw this in. This is a bonus. So when the president went to India, I remarked that when he got off the plane, he was wearing a yellow tie. And I said something about it, and then somebody told me to look up maritime flag colors. So I did. And I found the yellow flag. Now, there are flags of different colors in the maritime flags, and they all mean something. So each flag corresponds with a letter. And some of the flags have different shapes, they're geometric shapes. And there's like square shaped signal or rectangular shaped signal flags. And so when you put up, you can write words with them. You put up all the flags and then you write words. So the yellow flag, I kid you not, is the letter Q. Did you guys know that? Just the plain yellow flag. And here's the thing that I thought was really interesting, because I remarked about the president's tie, and the president's tie was yellow, but it wasn't gold. And somebody said, oh, it's for gold. I was like, No, it's not gold, it's yellow. His tie is yellow. And I'm going to show it to you. So look at his tie. This is not gold. That's yellow. That is as yellow can be. See that? Okay? So that's his tie. That he got off the plane wearing that tie. And so now, let me tell you. So now the yellow flag is the 17th flag. It's the Q. It stands for Q. And then every flag not only corresponds with a letter, but it sends a message. And so the message of the yellow tie is this. So if you're coming into port and you put up the yellow flag, this is what it means. So here, listen. If you're flying this and the harbor master sees it, they know that the message you're sending is, my ship meets health regulations. I'm not making this up. Request clearance into port. My ship, our ship, meets health regulations. Kid you not. Request clearance into port. So this got me thinking, okay, so he's wearing a Q tie. He never wears yellow. He never does that. And then I meet the health regulations. So I just think this is really interesting because you got China, he's got China over a barrel with tariffs. And now they're imploding with the coronavirus. And the president, who doesn't like to travel, he goes all the way to India, 8,000 miles. And India is like the germiest place on the planet, you guys. I mean, has anybody ever been to India? I haven't been to India, but I've been to Africa, and I've been in mud huts in Africa, and I've been in places where there's flies everywhere because there's no real floors, and I've been in places where there's like sewage right down beside the road, and I'm here to tell you that that's the kind of place India is. And our president doesn't like germs. And so he goes to India. He goes to India, which is an up and coming, thriving democracy with a nationalist India First president. He goes there to see them in the midst of, really at the height of the coronavirus, when all logic would say cancel the trip, stay home. He goes to like the germiest place on the planet. And I know that he's not in the slums like Mother Teresa and doing things like that, but still, you get my point. And he gets off the plane wearing the yellow Q tie, and the message is, ship meets health regulations, request clearance to port. Does anybody else think that's really interesting? And I think too, when I was listening to the Indian broadcast, the broadcaster was making a lot of conjecture and saying, we don't know if there's going to be big trade deals coming out of this. We think there's going to be some military equipment, but she was clearly concerned, like she wanted there to be trade deals, and it was very clear from her stance that President Trump 100% had the upper hand here, that he was coming to see Modi, but that our president is the one that holds all the cards. And that Modi was hoping to make some deals with him. And so I wouldn't be surprised, you guys, because of everything that's going on with 5G technology, with Huawei, with the sanctions against Huawei, with people being indicted, with all of these resignations, with China lowering their tariffs on us. There's so much about China that is just royally un-American and undemocratic. They're communist. Like, they literally throw their people into metal boxes when they have the flu, if these pictures we're seeing are correct. But so I think the president is in the process of breaking up with China as a trade and manufacturing partner. That's what my spidey senses are telling me. That's what I'm getting as kind of a Holy Spirit download. I may be wrong about that, but I think that's what's happening. I think that we're making a transition because India is a big country, and it's a democratic country There are many Christians in India. There's a lot of Hindus. I know that, but you know they were under British rule until the 20th century. So their thinking and their way of thinking is very much closer to the Western ideal than China. They're not communist. So that's just me throwing that out there. And we'll have to wait and see. But you know, sometimes Dilly talks about his Nostra Dilly moments. I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm having a Nostra Mary moment, and we're going to circle back one day, and you're going to go, wow, you were spot on. So I'm just going to throw that out there, and I'm going to say I think that's what's going on, and it may take a while. We're not going to see something next week, right? I think that the president was laying the groundwork for what's going to be happening in his second term. So what do you guys think? What do you think? I just think I think it's cool. Yeah. You think I'm right? Yeah. So just keep your eyes open. You know, Modi is going to be back here. We know that. He loves the president. The other reason that you know that the president has the upper hand on this is that that if you go back and look at the video of the president when the president lands, before he gets down the steps, President Modi is at the bottom of the steps. He literally runs out to the plane. And he's there and he embraces the president. He's like fanboying the president. And he's a prime minister. Who does that? Nobody does that. But he just, you know, our president has so much charisma and he has so much favor. And, you know, he's the golden boy of the world. And so he gets off the plane and this president he just hugs him, right? And he's fawning over the first lady, and it's so obvious that our president has the upper hand here, and that he's moving in the favor of God, that the prosperity of our nation is a bellwether for the healing and prosperity of the rest of the world. I just got chills when I said that. But I think that's what's happening. It's not just draining the swamp, but it's bringing the goodness of God and the abundance of God and the glory of God into all of the places that our president goes. I really think that his visit to India was very significant. I think that's what was happening. And, you know, I've talked about when I guess I see these things because, you know, when he went to North Korea, I said this is really significant. The president is a father of nations, and I see that. You know, you had 100 and some people said 110,000, some people said 125,000. That's a lot of people in a stadium there cheering on the president of another country. And you had people lined up the entire route of the motorcade, waving and dancing, and bands playing and cheering and waving flags and waving American flags and waving the Indian flag for our president and first lady. So that's not normal, you guys. We never saw that when Obama went to India. Did you know that he went to India? So yeah, it was incredible. And so, you know, this is the great awakening that we're seeing is happening around the world. I mean, we're seeing it in Iran, for example. The Iranians are coming to Christ, converting to Christianity at record paces. They're leaving the mosques. They're having house churches. They're putting their lives at risk. It's the fastest growing church in the West. So it's amazing. It's amazing. But anyway, so anything else? Last chance. Let me check how are we? Try to watch Obama. Yeah, I think the coronavirus was I think it was, I think it's a bioweapon. I do. And you know, the president is not at all concerned. I mean, he says, you know, we'll just see how, you know, we'll just let it play out. When he says things like that, like, listen to him, you know? He says that about a lot of things. He's like, yeah, let's just let it play out, you know? And he says, hey, you know, wash your hands. Don't let people sneeze on you. You know, maybe stay home a little bit more if you're worried. That kind of thing. So just pay attention. If the president seems worried, then you worry. But if he's not worried yet, he goes, we'll see. We'll just see. We'll see how it works out. We'll see what happens, you know? So that's my advice to you. What do I think about the pink tie? I haven't looked into the symbolism. Does anybody have any revelation about that? About the pink tie? I noticed it. But you know, everything they do, especially when traveling abroad, the outfits that Melania wears, they all have significance, and some of the Anons, some of the Q followers have dug into the significance of those things. It was anti-bullying pink day? Okay, interesting. Well, that's interesting because the press sure tried to bully him at that press conference. That was awful. I mean, he even got to the end and said, hey guys, there's really absolutely no cause for division. Can we drop it all for this? This is too important. So yeah, that dress she had on was I think it was a Carolina Herrera dress. It was embroidered. It had flowers on it. They looked like tulips. So I don't know the significance, but it was cool. So anyway, any more questions or comments? Hit the hearts if you're having a good time. If you didn't share this out already, hit the heart, hit the arrow at the bottom, go up and click share from beginning, and then I think that's it. So if you're just getting here, I'm Mary Grace. You're on Mary Grace Media, and you can follow me on Mary Grace Media on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Periscope. And you can also go to my website, which is marygracemedia.com. And if you ever have any messages for me, you can contact me through the website. So I will be back on Sunday night at about 7:30 Eastern. I'll be doing music, worship, inspiration. And those of you who haven't heard that before, if you're new here, you can go back on this same channel and you can watch my music that I did on Sunday night. And the good thing about that is you can fast forward or rewind or whatever you want. And so I hope this was helpful. I hope that you guys really got some value from this. If you did, if you find what I'm bringing amazing and awesome and you like the content, you can go to my website and click on the contribution link. You can do that. It says support, I think. And you can do like a one-time contribution. You can do a monthly, whatever you want. I think you can do like $5 a month, something like that. But if you want to do that, that's awesome. So I will see you guys on Sunday. And again, thank you everybody for sharing this out, and I appreciate it. And I hope that everybody is just staying in the peace of God, and that you are not the least little bit worried about what is happening, because God is good and the president's not worried and we are winning. So everybody make it a great day and a great weekend, and I will see you guys back here on Sunday night, same channel, 7:30 Eastern. Bye, everybody.